all of us
Thanks
for
for
not having Christmas colors or holiday, garb or ugly sweaters on. Just didn't quite get prepped enough for the Christmas spirit, but
That's right. Maybe we'll start caroling toward the end.
no.
no.
How about no?
All right. Well, happy holidays, everyone. My name is Matt Sims. I'm a cloud solution architect here at Microsoft. And I'm just going to start our conversation today around some of the troubleshooting tips and tricks. And I'm going to focus the beginning part of our conversation around media and media quality. And media quality is not the only thing that impacts the only source of trouble that we see with Teams phone and Teams calling, but it's definitely a big part in my experience, and I spent most of my career in telephony. It's certainly a big part of where things can go awry and where you can run into trouble. So I'm going to just start with some of the building blocks here and some of the tools that we can rely on with Teams phone. And then Jeff and Duane will build upon that and talk through some other scenarios, troubleshooting scenarios and tools that we have on the Microsoft side to help make sense of things when you run into challenges. So let's just start with the basics around voice over IP media, and the big. Oh yeah, any chance to get a tool like Snooper? Oh, good question there. With voice over IP media, and we with Teams, we use industry standard protocols for managing our media. We encrypt all our media with secure RTP, which uses a pre-shared key to encrypt the voice over IP media that we use with Teams. It's impacted by really three major factors. So the first is packet loss. So how many packets are received on the recipient end from the amount of packets that are sent on the sender side. Jitter, which is variable delay in the packets ending up from where they started from to the endpoint to their destination. And then the latency, which is just the physics of how long it takes the packets to get from the sender to the recipient. I'll show on the next slide a couple of what we use as our standards for what represents a good what represents optimal jitter, what represents optimal packet loss, what represents optimal latency within a Teams call. And then as you're looking at some of the basic tools that I'm going to show you, and then the broader scope tools like that Duane is going to go into, it helps give a framework of kind of a red or green state or healthy or unhealthy state for a particular media stream. So we have packet loss, jitter, and latency again as those kind of the standard metrics that we can look at for any real-time media stream. That includes audio, video, and also screen sharing traffic. The next consideration that we always are contending with in any Teams phone environment is quality of service. And the idea with quality of service is to prioritize network traffic, to differentiate it, to assure that it's timely delivery. And with any real-time platform, Teams, Skype for Business before it, but really any video conferencing or IP telephony platform, making sure that there's timely delivery of the packets is of paramount importance. So the key thing is Teams will do a lot of things to accommodate less than optimal network settings. And so we'll do things like we will conceal issues if packets aren't delivered in time, or if certain packets aren't delivered if we're in a packet loss scenario, but we can only accommodate for that to some degree. So our guidance is always to leverage the intelligence that Teams has to compensate for a less than perfect network, but it's generally a best practice to still implement quality of service for all the different clients that are running the Teams app, and that includes Windows clients, which can be QoS via group policy objects, but also looking at your network boundary devices like your edge routers and doing port and IP-based quality of service as well, so that you can prioritize the traffic that is being exchanged between your network edge and the Microsoft network as well. So that is that in the days of UCaaS, that in particular is a step that sometimes I see being missed, is making sure that you are facilitating quality of service on the network edge, so that you're prioritizing the traffic as it's ingressing to your network edge from the Microsoft network. So it ends up being a combination of group policy settings for your Windows clients, and then port and IP based QoS for the non-Windows clients and for your network edge. So I want to talk just a minute or two about a simple tool that doesn't get a lot of airplay, and that's the Microsoft Teams Network Assessment Tool. This tool's been around for a while. It used to be called the Skype for Business Network Assessment Tool, and it's what I love about the tool is it's really dead simple. So it's a free download from the Microsoft site, and you install it on an endpoint, on a Windows endpoint, and it gets executed from the command line. There's a couple different switches that you can run against the tool, one of which it does basically port checks against the Microsoft Teams service to validate that it can establish the connectivity to the necessary ports to set up a media stream. So these are things like the transport relays and stuff that are used for media relay purposes with Teams. The second, I think the more useful scenario for this tool is you can use it to set up essentially a dummy media stream and export and to basically report back on the health of that media stream. So in the screenshot that I have on the slide here, you see that it reports back the latency, it reports back the jitter in milliseconds, it reports whether it was able to establish UDP connectivity. And we always prefer UDP just because of the less overhead attached to UDP as a transport. And then we see which IP we were able to connect to on the Microsoft service side. And again, it's just a very lightweight tool. One way that you can use the tool as well is to, you can run it like interactively via command line, or it will also write out to a CSV file. So if you'd like to have it determine over a longer period of time what the health of a particular media, a media stream from an endpoint looks like, you can have it output that. So again, it's a nice, really simple way, especially if you have an issue on a particular IP subnet or with a particular endpoint itself. This is a great way that you can, at the very least, remove the network as a possible cause of that.
Matt, the other scenario that this comes into play for too is when you're maybe you're incorporating a new building or a new location or even a new floor. You for sure would like to try to capture that pre-deployment snapshot so that you can maintain that level of quality or at least correct any issues prior to, and then as you mentioned, track it. But good use cases, we're taking on a new business, merger acquisition, new site, new building, new location. Run the network assessment tool prior to putting users on it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's a great way to just establish that baseline and just make sure that there's nothing unforeseen before, to your point, before you put a particular site or building into production, that you just have that peace of mind that you know that things look healthy, both from the firewall perspective with those with the connectivity checks that the tool can do, and then also with the quality checks. So great point. Another
Even
thing
if you're already doing
yeah.
meetings, right, and you plan to add voice, good opportunity to kind of rerun that assessment. I think we see that a lot of times as well. We've been doing meetings for years, right? And we're going to add voice. We should be fine. Should be or trust, right? One of the two.
Yeah, I mean, great point. Great point. The one of the things I think is really key that I've become a believer in through the years is that like a network is pretty much like a living, breathing organism. So it might be healthy at a point in time, and maybe when you went into production with a given site or a given organization on teams, that things were healthy. But a lot can change. A lot does change in a network over time, and so to your point, like I tend to not always trust. Whatever happened in the past on a network because so many variables can change. And as Duane gets in maybe a little bit later to the call quality dashboard, that's I think one of our a great tool to keep apprised of what's going on like at a macro level on the network. And if something doesn't look right on a particular site or a particular subnet, it provides a great means of isolating that really quickly. So before I transition things over to Jeff, I just wanted to make a put up a quick plug-in for Call Analytics. Call Analytics gets skipped over, I think, a lot in discussions around troubleshooting with teams. What I really like about Call Analytics is that it's user-centric and it's just dead simple. You have access to a lot of the underlying data that you can get at with call quality dashboard. But it is user centric. So being able to quickly just plug in a user's name into the Teams admin center and quickly get at a list of their recent calls and a list of their recent meetings kind of parsed out. And then with the differing views that there are going into um, and I forget the detailed view or the expert level view, but it will show, or maybe it's called debug or something, where it shows all of the information that's coming from the RTP stream. So you can look at media candidates and where the connectivity happened with the team service, if there was a media relay invoked, if what protocol or what codecs were being used. You see all of that granular level of information, and being able to isolate it down to a particular caller or a particular meeting is just really, really dead simple. The last point I would make here is for a number of years we got feedback that it's great. It was always great to have retroactive or retrospective access to calls and meetings with Call Analytics, but there's plenty of different scenarios where it's even more useful to be able to troubleshoot in real time when there are media quality issues happening in a meeting or in a conference, and that is now available with Call Analytics. So if you have a particularly high visibility meeting, for example, you can actually look in real time while the meeting is currently in progress. Get a visual glimpse of the participants in the meeting and where content is being shared in the meeting, and start to dig into troubleshooting that, again, in a high visibility meeting scenario or a scenario where you're trying to reproduce a problem. So with that said, like that's just kind of I did my best to start the conversation with just some basic building blocks around voice over IP media. The fact that we are not doing anything with Teams really any differently than the majority of other voice over IP platforms. We encrypt all of our media. That's maybe slightly different than certain platforms, but in terms of being heavily reliant on packet loss, jitter, latency, we play by all those rules. And we have some very simple tools in the network assessment tool and in call analytics to start to validate that we have proper network connectivity to the Teams service, and that we have a healthy metrics for those via the network assessment tool, and call analytics provide us visibility into that. Now, Jeff is going to talk through some other troubleshooting scenarios beyond media quality, and some involving some media quality issues. And then Duane's going to talk through macro level with call quality dashboard and the quality of experience and review reports, how we can manage the health of a Teams environment across a large enterprise. So, Jeff, all yours.
Yeah, maybe just building on where you picked off. First of all, thumbs up. My screen sharing okay?
Yeah, it looks great here.
Okay, great. So call analytics, where you were just picking up, Matt. I figured while I'm in the TAC, we'll maybe just show kind of some quick examples, since I was doing some calls this morning. But in call analytics under meeting calls, right? We've got, as you mentioned, if this user was in a live meeting, I can see the view active meetings and then get those real-time statistics, right? But in the example we have here, we can select the meeting, right? Obviously, I've got a little bit of telemetry as far as the overall participation. One thing that folks might not really pay attention to is the fact that if you notice the timestamp for the different attendees of the meeting or the call, we can then drill down into either real-time or historically, depending on the user and the licensing type, right? And get those details. Sorry, I picked a bad example here. I just was on one that was better. Let's grab this guy here. So clicking on that little timestamp, now we're going to get both historical and or real-time graphing. And if you notice the device that I was on, looks like it had some jitter, got some work I got to do, but just kind of building on your call analytics story. Some folks don't know that you can click on that little timestamp and get the individual user join time and statistics for the participants in a meeting or in a multi-person call or in a person-to-person call. And also scroll over, we're getting some notifications here, right? So that's just kind of an example recap of a meeting that I tried to produce this morning that was bad, right? And just show you how you can kind of drive into and get to those statistics. And then, as you mentioned, right, we grab the individual user, we can get the details, and then you can get into the debug scenarios if you want to and bring up that screen. One I like to call out here is also CPU, right? We don't often think about how the CPU actually affect, right? We focus on network, we focus on media, we focus on UDP and round trip delay, but sometimes CPU can be the cause of a particular challenge where the user that is experiencing a potential bad call might also be like multitasking and having 10 other things going on. I was working with a customer recently, found a particular user who happened to be watching like the security camera stream for that building with 8 individual video streams while they were participating in a meeting. And we noticed that the CPU utilization on the device was absolutely maximized. And therefore Teams was trying to reprioritize the processor. And so once we closed out that security stream, right, meeting quality became better. It wasn't network related, it was compute related. So, we're going to jump over here to a screen that I wanted to kind of bring up for folks today, because a lot of folks maybe either forgot that this particular tool set is out there, or maybe haven't paid attention to the fact that there's been enhancements added. So I'm under testconnectivity.microsoft.com, all sorts of different connectivity tests. As you mentioned, Matt, we've got the network assessment tool. The network test available here is more of a tenant out look, but you can go to the network test. But very specifically, a lot of Teams tools inside this test screen. And most importantly, I'll call out a few of them, but recently we've added some, right? So down here in the center part of the screen, Teams Android desk phone sign-in, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but this was I'd say recent, the past 6 months added capability for administrators to kind of validate, is a user able to log in? I've got a standard Teams sign in. Can I get in from the client? But the Android desk phones, right? All of our physical phones, how often do we kind of get the, I don't know, somebody in our community this morning was discussing unable to connect to workplace join, right? How do we determine what's causing that particular problem? I'll kind of take you through a couple examples. Also Teams room sign in, but just be aware that like these are administrative tools and or in some cases user implemented tools, right? User doesn't have a dial pad. Why don't I have a dial pad, right? We've got a dial pad test tool here that allows you to kind of go through. And if I click over, hold on one second. I'm going to move 1 minute. I'm going to move this here, jump into an example dial pad test tool, right? And this, unfortunately, because I'm doing the right things, right? I did get a successful dial pad test, but if you just look through the details here, we check for licensing, we check for policy settings, we check for enterprise voice enablement, and this is like a one-stop shop for you to kind of walk through all those tests. And I've got one example here that has some not green checks that I'll show you what that looks like, but good place to go to say, why doesn't a user have a dial pad, or what am I maybe missing in their configuration? Let's see here. What's this other example here? So this was an Android device login test for a particular user. I administratively logged in, but I said, I want to check a user in my environment. So Lee in my environment, how am I going to be able to test what's going on here? And if you notice in these test steps, right, again, we look for the device registration. We check Microsoft Graph for the proper licensing. Down here, we're looking to make sure the licenses are applied correctly. And then really more importantly, conditional access policy validation and Intune configuration validation is done here. And if you notice, I've got just yellow warnings. I'm not failing anything, but it is warning me that there could be unsupported policies in my environment, and gives me guidance right here, clickable guidance to say what things are supported in conditional access policies and how do I make sure that I don't have anything that is unsupported required in my conditional access policies, because that kind of causes some of those unable to authenticate, unable to log in, or unable to workplace join. So again, just, be aware that this tool set's out here, some voicemail checks. There's even, Skype for business checks out here, but Exchange Online checks, just kind of a super cool landing point for you to be able to kind of do some of those troubleshooting things where you can mimic or emulate what an end user might be seeing in their environment without having to kind of log in as that end user. Okay. I'll make sure that we kind of, once I get done presenting, maybe when Duane's presenting, I'll put the links with little quick summaries into the chat just so that we've got these different links. Another link that I wanted to kind of show, it's not so much a troubleshooting tool, but it's one of the ones that I don't think a lot of folks know about. But if you go to dialin.teams.microsoft.com, as an end user, not as an admin, but as an end user, you've got configuration checks, or I should say maybe just double check your settings, if you will, that you don't have to do within the Teams client itself. Audio conferencing, reset their PIN. End users can kind of control how their voicemail is affected, trying to keep things out of troubleshooting mode, out of IT support cases. Wanted to kind of call this one out because honestly speaking, I learned about this maybe 2-3 months ago, but call queue membership and being able to control your call queue. If you needed to do that without having the Teams client loaded, you can actually go to dialin.teams.microsoft.com and opt out of a queue or opt into a queue. So this is not really an administration or an admin tool. It's something that most end users don't even know that's out there. But they can do different controls not using the Teams client right from the web. So I'll stick that the dialin.teams link in the chat here shortly. And then the other thing that I thought about jumping into is around devices. And a lot of times we get these questions about how do I know if my devices are healthy? How do I know that upgrades are taking place correctly? And so I'm in the Teams admin center. I'm under my Teams devices, and I'm going to my Teams certified phone section, not the SIP device section, but the Teams certified phone section. And I purposely set the tenant up and didn't do some updates so that we can kind of demonstrate this today, what these different categories mean and how you can kind of take advantage of what's available through device administration in the Teams admin center. A lot of folks kind of skip over some of these cards that are produced at the top. And this is one that I think gets missed out on a lot. So you can see I've got some offline devices. I've got some devices that aren't maybe in an unhealthy state, non-urgent updates. But if you click on the view details here, it's a little bit hard to see because the window isn't as big maybe as I'm demonstrating it, but definitely take advantage and click on view details there. What you're going to get is a status update kind of on the Ring update process for your devices, right? And so if you look real small here, we've got all Teams updates and firmware updates, and this kind of gives you a way to summarize when you've got hundreds of devices in that list, right? In my demonstration tenant, 10, 15 devices, it's not a very exhaustive list. It's a little easier to see what needs to be done. But now we can see I've got multiple device types that are slated for a particular update. If I want to look at just what are the firmware updates that I need to accomplish before I do my Teams updates, hopefully you have automatic update rings set. But if you wanted to look at what's kind of qualifying for each automatic update phase, I can now see I have one device that is ready for a firmware update, and then multiple devices or different devices that might also be ready for a Teams update. So just don't while it looks informational, don't hesitate to click the view details so that you can get a better readout of the larger estate of devices. And then, we often get the question, right? We've got the export button that's available here in case you've got a large state of devices and you want to see maybe what's slated for update. I think Don opened up the conversation earlier with the upcoming changes with AOSP and the underlying firmware and Intune changes that are going to be taking place. It's important to make sure that we get devices as up to date as possible, set those automatic update rings, but also pay attention to what does non-urgent really mean. We can see here we've got a firmware update and a version of Teams that's available, right? And so it's both. It could be more than one component that needs to be updated. You might see, company portal or OEM agent updates that are required. Just take advantage of kind of the buttons that are available here using your automatic update process, but use the view details if you're trying to get a better understanding of what's going on across the estate of devices that are out there. And then I mentioned kind of automatic updates, but also pay attention. We can provide some documentation around the difference between general and validation. And then there's a third condition, right, which might be more for executives or maybe boardrooms, things like that. So we can kind of have that last, most protected update ring that's out there. And then the other thing that I kind of wanted to show here, and it tiptoes into, I don't call it a slippery slope, but it can get rather detailed, being able to understand where logging is available. We work in the sales and enablement organization. We try to help you guys through your process of onboarding. Microsoft support is absolutely much more detailed than troubleshooting. And so if you ever are asked to produce or provide to Microsoft support a log file from the Teams client itself, Control-Alt-Shift-1 downloads a log file for the Teams client itself. We're going to get into the device log file if you're using a Teams physical phone. I'll show you what that looks like too. But it's kind of cool that we have the amount of log file telemetry that's available. When I call it a slippery slope, the log file is a giant bundle of a multitude of different files, and you almost have to have a little bit of maybe a PhD in phone, a PhD in different configurations to be able to kind of interpret these log files. But an example that I tend to kind of pivot to from time to time is think about the use case of you've applied a policy in the Teams admin center. How do we know if the user client or the device itself has incorporated the policy that you applied to a user? In this log file, again, lots of different things to look at, but we could open up the sync policies file to see, does my settings in the Teams admin center match what the client on the user side is getting? And so we can look inside that synchronization file to see, did I sync my event policy, my calling policy, my admin settings, etc., right? I don't recommend getting deep into the log files. I recommend making sure that you know how to get to them, because likely if you have to open up a support case with Microsoft, one of the first things they're going to ask for is, could you provide us a log file? All that said, if it's not a physical or it's not a user that's on Teams on the web or Teams on the client, we can go into a device. And you'll notice this button up here, it says download device logs administratively from the admin center. You can grab that physical device, your certified Teams phone, maybe it's your MTR. You can grab those log files here. And underneath the history of the device, we've got device diagnostics. You can see I requested a file. Once that file is curated and available to the admin tenant, then you can download that same log file, right, and provide that to Microsoft support. So it is, again, I don't want to recommend you get yourself deep into reading log files, trying to interpret them. That's really where Microsoft support can come into play. But if you're familiar with at least getting to the file and being able to provide it to Microsoft support, they'll be able to kind of triage your problem a little bit faster. Excuse me. Let's see, where are we at on time? You know what, Duane? I'm going to go ahead and transition over to you. I was going to cover a little bit of how Call Record Insights could be another potential troubleshooting tool. What we'll do is we'll stick the video recording that we did for the summit session on Call Record Insights, because that's another way to get a capture of just PSTN and Teams user-to-user calls and meetings. We'll stick that video in the chat here. It's up on our YouTube. Go back to that, because sometimes Call Record Insight can be another tool to use for troubleshooting, call quality, media disconnects, and those type of things. So we'll stick that video out there. But Duane, why don't you pick up from here and dive into your area of the topic for today?
Sure will. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to start this out. I'm going to go really fast, and some of this is going to be high level. So feel free to ask any questions. The recording will be posted. You can always reach out to internally to your account teams, your Converged Com CSA, your Modern Work CSA, all of that will be available. So I started this out with kind of a scenario. Jeff gave this to me. Appreciate that. How many people, just give me a thumbs up if you've ever gotten this call that says, the CEO, Satya, called and said he had a bad call. Right? Nobody's ever seen that happen. Okay, one person.
They're all flying in now.
I know, right?
I think there's a lot of that happening.
Those are killing me. Okay, so one of the tools we talk about a lot is QER in Power BI. What is QER? QER is quality of experience reporting in Power BI. This backends to call quality dashboard. The reason we set this up is because as Teams administrators, there are specific things that we want to see, right? If you are not familiar with QER, please reach out. It takes about 15, 30 minutes to set it up. I can walk you through it while I'm drinking coffee, making coffee, or chasing the neighbor. Either way, doesn't take a whole lot of time. But I say that because one of the big things is we need a building file. What does that do? That enables CQD to determine whether or not the endpoint was connected to an internal or a managed network or an external unmanaged network, right? It allows it to include the building data, location data, targets problem resolution, network optimization things, and it will help map subnets to buildings, countries, and other attributes, right? So all of this combines so that we can get actionable reports. Why is that important? Because we want actionable reports. I want to be able to fix things. What does it look like? This is it, right? It's a simple CSV file. You'll see on here, the red that you see highlighted are required. The blue is not required, and the green is optional, right? So, but it has to have all of these columns. You strip the headers. You can upload this via CQD, right? If you don't know how to do that, I can give you directions on that. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was intelligent media quality classifiers, right? What are these? This is where we've started to take the CQD and the QER reporting into the next level, right? Because historically, right, what happens is we have thresholds that we've designed, right, to determine whether a call is good or bad, right? We call them legacy stream classifiers, right? They're simple, they're conditional statements, right? There's a threshold. If you exceed that threshold, it's poor. If you're under, it's good, right? This is where we begin to take that into the next level and take into account everything that's going on, right? Couple of different classifiers, two categories in here, remote and local, right? You'll see the local models, the remote models, and then you got this other one over here carried over from remote models called other, right? The local is my inbound network, my local compute, my device, and media modality, right? Remote is just that. It's Jeff's uplink, Jeff's compute, Jeff's device, right? Is he leaking that echo, right? And then other is going to be outside, right, of that. So again, local classifiers, they look at the users. Remote, look at the remote side, right, or a participant in the call. Excited to talk about this QER version 5.0. This is the Power BI template. This is an actual screenshot you're seeing of the QER Power BI template. How many people have seen it, used it? No? Yes, maybe? Okay. Extremely useful. You get some definitions in here. I did want to highlight some of the things on here. You'll see this media report. It's been updated to use the new intelligent media quality classifiers, and it's going to better reflect, right, the experience of those end users. Okay, so you'll see poor sharing rate, poor video rate, drop failures, all those are listed in here. We're going to get some additional information around that, right? Filtering on specific, we've changed the way this looks a little bit, so you can actually filter down to, say, the building name. That's why the building file that I talked about at the beginning of this is so important, right? So I can look and say the office in Jacksonville has an issue historically and consistently, or, you know, at Matt's house, right? Once you've uploaded that file, you can go through and do this filtering, right? Do you absolutely positively have to have a building file to use QER? No, you can use QER and you can still look at ISPs and countries. Best practice recommendation from Microsoft is to have that building data file uploaded into CQD. Now, if you need our assistance doing that, let me know. Again, it's really not complicated. It's creating that CSV file and uploading it. There can only be one active sheet in there at a time. So if you had an existing one, and as Jeff's example earlier, right, we've acquired this new organization, we want to add that in. We would download it from CQD, make our changes, remove the existing one, and re-upload, right? Can take some time to process through. If there's overlapping subnets, it will warn you, and it will stop. You'll have to make corrections. So, okay, too much coffee, sorry. Updated search page here, filtering by subnet, public subnet, ASN, conference ID has always been there, meeting type, session type, and UPN, right? This allows you to look for the specific user, the network, location, I think, is the big part here. When you perform that search, you know, you get information directly on the search page so you can identify what's impacting that user. And this is what you'll see up here with poor media quality, poor media, poor sending, incoming, right? You're going to see all of that now on this page, on this report. User health report, you can drill down, right? That hasn't changed, right? But you can go down into the detailed. The interesting part about this now is there's new detected problems, right? Over there off to the right. And you'll see, I don't know if you will see because this is kind of small, but you'll see drop streams, right? What's happening, right? Sending compute, incoming compute, right? Issues that are potentially need to be investigated. Meeting details report, same thing, right? Interesting part about this is we've put the number of impacted users on here. Now, when we think about these new classifiers, these intelligent media classifiers, right? We can look and see how many people were impacted, right? So if Jeff, myself, and Matt are all on this call, right, and Matt is on, his Apple earbuds, right, driving down 95 with both windows down, right, and Jeff and I are having a hard time hearing, Matt's causing all this echo. But if Matt doesn't report that call and Duane does, you're going to start by looking at Duane as a user, right? You're going to go into the analytics that Matt was talking about and Jeff was referencing earlier, and you're going to start to look at Duane. But you're not going to find a solution in there until you drill down a little farther. And this is going to help you do that. Again, the new intelligent classifiers, they're the latest QER 5.0. It is not a Mustang. It is QER, quality of experience template. I had to slip the Mustang in there, Matt. You can start using them. That is the best way to start using them, is to just jump in, right? If you have questions, you do have help available, and we will be more than happy to assist. You'll see this here as a weekly network metrics, right? So this is actually one of the newer reports down on the bottom, and it will show you kind of a pattern, right, over a period of time here. And of course, all the filters up there, those haven't changed, right? They're still available. But we're trying to bring all of this together and to collate and use not just the old legacy qualifiers, but the new qualifiers as well, and that telemetry, and bring that in so that we can help and improve that end user experience. And I don't think I took a whole breath.
Well done.
And then that is what we've got. So
That's great. Thanks, Duane.
yes, sir. We have questions out there.
I don't think there are. I think we actually did a good job keeping up on all the questions that were out there.
Yeah, there were some good ones in the chat. I'm always floored by really good detailed questions.
Anybody else have a question they still have? Raise their hand, come off mute. Yeah, Tim, we do. We do these sessions in general monthly, variety of different topics. We'll throw the YouTube link out there for the past sessions, and get into that community we're talking about, because we post upcoming sessions there too, as well as other information. Any takers? Want to come off mute and raise your hand?
Oh, I
and
see
come off
it.
mute?
I see a good question here around, Amit says, new to the Teams world, are there good tools to troubleshoot SBC connection issues? I'll give my answer, and I would love others to comment, but generally for troubleshooting SBC issues, I usually use like whatever is the SBC vendors, either logging or diagnostic tooling. So for example, Audio Codes has some logging tools. Oracle has similar. All the certified SBC vendors usually have their own flavor that helps parse out the SIP ladder diagrams and such, and pretties everything up. Hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Sorry. Kind of to build on that, it depends on what the issue is, right? If we're talking connectivity into Teams, that's one issue, right? Are we talking about call failure? Are we talking about setup failure on the call? And that's where that syslog viewer comes in. And that's also where, utilizing the vendors logging comes in handy, right?
Yeah, and actually, Martin, thank you for that. Martin posted a good link to the within Call Quality Dashboard, the PSTN direct routing report as well. So there are a number of different kind of ways that to Duane's point, depending on the issue, there are several different tools. So that's helpful.
Something I just thought about pointing out here for those that heard Don and Jonathan talking earlier about the registration link and why that kind of is important. Love seeing clients help clients, right? People part of this community helping each other. I think that's one of the huge values of being kind of a member of the community is we can get comments like Martin providing some assistance and some guidance, right? It's the more thank you all that have joined. If you haven't joined yet, join so you can ask your question and get help from your peers in other organizations. That's fantastic, right? It's super cool. And we can see what other customers recommend for other customers, right? I just love that. So.
Yeah, great point, Jeff. Couldn't agree more. It's like we have a certain perspective coming from the Microsoft side, but it's I think the great value in the community is that it is just that. So we can learn from customers can learn from other customers and share their experiences and what's worked well, what hasn't worked well, yeah, that's awesome.
It's like David just threw something in about the building data piece, and it seems like there was a change in the template.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys have come across that at all.
I have not.
I have not either, but David, I'm going to respond back and ask you to ping me outside of this because I want to get some more details around that. Because the ASN's drawing directly from Microsoft internal, so yeah.
The table is a public table, though.
Right.
The
Yeah,
ASN
it is,
mapping
but
table is a public table.
I'm
Yeah.
curious what he's seeing right in the heat map.
Yep.
That's
Yeah, cool.
All right.
awesome.
Any other questions from the group? And thank you for all the questions, and keep it coming if that's the case. Otherwise, I think we may be good for today, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it.